we are going to take a look at my updated Broncos 53-man roster projection. Now that we have 2 preseason games in the books, we've seen a lot of tape on these guys, so I thought it would be appropriate to run through an updated roster projection. And let's get started in the quarterback room, where I have Denver just taking 2 quarterbacks. Now, you can easily make an argument for all 3 to make the active 53-man roster, but ultimately, I think Ben DiNucci is on the practice squad. Jarrett Stidham has not looked all that great so far, if we're being honest, but he got a 2-year, $10 million contract. He is making this roster. Moving on to the running back room, where now we get some change-up, if you will. Javonte Williams, Samaje Perine, locks to make the roster, of course, but Jaleel McLaughlin I have as well. Now, the UDFA out of Youngstown State has been so impressive so far throughout the preseason. If Denver thinks they can sneak him through the waiver wire and put him on the practice squad, they're going to find out that another team out there is going to look at this and go, wow, we can't believe Denver moved on from a guy who scored 3 touchdowns in 2 preseason games. He is definitely better than our RB3. Now, let me know, are you buying in on the McLaughlin hype? Type Y for yes or type N for no down in the comment section. This is the pinned comment, so if YouTube sticks an ad break when I'm done talking, take advantage of it. Scroll on down, give me your answer, let the ad run, cha-ching for me, and then come back to the video. Now let's look at the wide receiver room, where I've got 6 wideouts making it. Jerry Jeudy, Courtland Sutton, Marvin Mims. Those 3 are locks to make the roster. Marquez Callaway I have making the roster, and this is where things get a bit dicey. I'm going to put Brandon Johnson and Jalen Virgil down tentatively as making the 53-man roster. Now, if you're unfamiliar with the way roster cutdowns work, if you put a player on IR before the roster cutdowns, their season with your team is done, meaning you can't take them off IR. So I think what Denver's plan is to get through roster cutdowns and then put either Brandon Johnson or Jalen Virgil, who just suffered a torn meniscus and he has to get surgery to repair it, on short-term IR. And then you bring up maybe Montrell Washington, right? Try to get him through the waiver wire period. And then once you get an extra roster spot open because Virgil or Brandon Johnson, who's dealing with an ankle injury, hit short-term IR, you can elevate Montrell Washington, or maybe little Jordan Humphrey, a guy Denver signed earlier this offseason who has a lot of experience with Sean Payton down in New Orleans. My guess is that's Denver's strategy, is can we get these guys through the waiver wire, and then after the 24-hour waiver wire period is over and we can put guys on short-term IR to open up roster spots, these will be the first players that get a phone call. George and Sean Payton let them know what their plan is, and hopefully no one claims them for the Broncos' sake. Moving on to the tight end room, just 3 tight ends. I have Greg Dulcich, Adam Trautman, and Chris Manhertz. So there is one name that's not on there that you're all probably recognizing, and that would be our good friend Albert Okwuegbunam. The time for Albert O in Denver has come to a close. I just don't see him finding a roster spot after opening up the first depth chart as tight end 5. If Denver can find a trade partner for Albert O, I'm sure they will deal him in a heartbeat, but I don't know who's calling for him. I'm a little surprised he's still on the roster. I would think that the Broncos might do him a solid, release him now. That way a team could sign him, have him play in their final preseason game and get a good look at him. But for now, I have 3 tight ends making it. Moving on to the offensive line. I should have said earlier, by the way, I'm feeling under the weather today, so I'm sorry if I sound a little off. But Garett Bolles, Ben Powers, Lloyd Cushenberry, Quinn Miners, and Mike McGlinchey, of course, all locks to make the roster. And I've got 5 more linemen making it as well. If we have learned one thing through 2 preseason games so far, it's that Denver's offensive line, it doesn't look all that much better than last year. So I think the Broncos bring on an extra lineman, and Cam Fleming is your swing tackle. Kyle Fuller and Alex Forsythe are 2 centers. I wouldn't be shocked if they bring both guys on and maybe pivot one to guard if an injury were to pop up to Powers or Quinn Miners. I've got Alex Powell, the UDFA from Illinois, also making this roster. I think he has looked good so far throughout training camp and preseason. And then last year's 5th-round pick, Luke Wattenberg, he got completely steamrolled on that blocked kick against the Cardinals, and he was not that good last year. But is George Paton going to move on from a 5th-round pick after 1 season? I don't think so. Now, before we get to the defensive side of the football, I just want to thank all of our new subscribers that joined the channel during our Broncos 49ers watch party. We picked up 113 new subs, so thank you all so much for subscribing, and make sure to join us for our next watch party this Saturday against the Rams, who come to town. Now, let's get to the defensive side of the ball. So, Zach Allen, DJ Jones, those two are locks to make the roster. Jonathan Harris, I think, makes it, mostly because I don't know if there's anyone better on this roster. Elijah Garcia has been phenomenal through 2 preseason games. He's going to make this roster as a UDFA. Denver acquired him last year from the Rams. Matt Henningsen, a former day 3 pick out of Wisconsin, he has looked pretty good. I think he makes this roster. And then someone who they signed back in like June, July-ish, somewhere in that range, Tyler Lancaster. He missed all of last season after getting injured in the preseason with the Raiders, but he had a lot of starts in Green Bay with the Packers. And Broncos' defensive line, it's got a lot of bark, but not a lot of bite right now. I think they could stand to make sure they have some good veteran players like Lancaster. Now, you might notice that Mike Purcell is not on there. He is still on the non-football injury list. The way this works is if you go into training camp and you've got an injury that was not sustained during team activities or from the regular season last year, you go on the non-football injury list, which Mike Purcell is on currently. And if you stay on the non-football injury list after roster cutdown days, you are going to miss the first 4 games minimum. So I don't have an update on what the issue is with Purcell, but if the injury is pretty serious, kind of like Billy Turner last year, for example, maybe Purcell is on the NFI list to start the regular season. Does not count against the 53-man roster, but he does miss the first 4 games of the year. As for your linebackers, Randy Gregory, Jonathan Cooper, Frank Clark, Nick Bonito, those 4 outside linebackers make the roster in my eyes. Alex Singleton, Josie Jewell, Drew Sanders, and you got to battle for that last linebacker spot on the inside after Jonas Griffith's injury. Justin Trinad, I think, does take that spot over a UDFA like Seth Benson, for example. Now, a name that is not on that list, Baron Browning. He's on the PUP list because he suffered an injury during Broncos, well, at least they say so, training. He got that knee injury back in the offseason. He got surgery on it. Sean Payton did not sound very optimistic about him being ready for the regular season. So I think Browning could start the year on the PUP list. And if he does, he is out minimum 4 weeks like Mike Purcell to begin the year. But he does not count against your 53-man roster. Now we have some more defensive roster projections to look at. But really quickly, give me 30 seconds of your time because I want to tell you about our sportsbook partner, BetUS. Chatsports.com/bet. Enter that link. Put the promo code Broncos125 in, and BetUS gives you a 125% deposit bonus. If you want to put some skin in the game this year and you want to put some money down, you want to bet on your Denver Broncos, use our link along with the promo code, and then you're going to get a 125% deposit bonus no matter what you put in. Let's take a look at the cornerback room now. Pat Surtain, Damari Mathis, K'Wan Williams, those are all locks to make the roster. I think UDFA from 2 years ago, Jaquan McMillan, he is going to make this roster as a preseason standout thus far. Riley Moss, unfortunately, has been MIA with that core muscle injury he sustained at the start of camp all preseason long, but of course, he does make the roster. And then Isang Bassi, he had that great interception in the Cardinals game. K'Wan Williams is dealing with an ankle injury that is starting to rise for my panic level in terms of his availability week 1. If he is out, Isang Bassi would be the guy to fill in at the nickel position. So I think he definitely makes this roster over maybe a Delonte Hood, a Faion Hicks, or Trayman Smith. We'll look at some of those guys later on in the video. As for the safety room, most teams roll with 4 safeties, but I couldn't cut one of these guys. So I've got Simmons, K-Jack, Caden Stearns, J.L. Skinner, a 6th-round pick from this past draft. He's definitely making the roster. He's looked really solid so far. And then last year's 5th-rounder out of Oklahoma, Delaren Turner-Yell, a special team standout. He is kind of on the borderline of making it or not making it. But ultimately, I'm looking at this room here and I go, well, K-Jack, he might be re-signed to another 1-year contract next offseason. Who knows? But Justin Simmons, he's going to be around here for quite some time, hopefully. Caden Stearns has always battled with injuries throughout his NFL career. It would be wise to take on an extra safety, Plus, I think these 5 guys are all deserving and worthy of a roster spot. And then to wrap up my roster projections, Brett Maher, Riley Dixon, and Mitchell Fabioni. Those are your special teams special teamers to make this roster. Now, you might notice some names on this list that I did not have on my roster projection. Tyler Beatty and Tony Jones. Tony Jones has not looked bad by any stretch, and maybe Denver does roll with 4 running backs and takes offensive lineman off, but for now I have him on the outside looking in. Kendall Hinton did not make last year's initial 53-man roster. He had some penalties in that Niners game. I don't like his chances anymore. We talked about Alberto. He has fallen down the depth chart. I just don't see him cracking this 53-man roster. PJ Locke, I did not like leaving off the list, but which safety am I putting him on over? Not J.L. Skinner. Maybe Delaire Turner-Yell, but I'll keep it with Turner-Yell for now. Trayman Smith was a free agent signing that was supposed to come in and do some special teams duties. So far, it's been Marvin Mims as your special team guy. So if Trayman Smith is not being a special teamer, I don't see him making this roster just as a corner. Fayan Hicks, a 7th rounder last year. He's been mid at best. No offense, Fayan. And then Aaron Patrick coming off a torn ACL. It's been an awesome comeback for him. But we ran through our outside linebackers, and I just don't see him taking a roster spot over the highly paid players like Randy Gregory and Frank Clark, or someone who's looked awesome so far like Jonathan Cooper. So for me, I have him on the outside. But let me know, what is your bold roster prediction? Is it this guy makes the roster, this guy misses the roster? The bolder, the better. So let me know in the comment section. The floor is yours. Give me your bold roster prediction. It is a hot day in Denver, Colorado today. 99 degrees is the high. So I had to go, excuse me, I'm sorry. I told you guys I was not feeling well. With my hottest first take hot take ever. And that is the Broncos are going to run laps on the field if they lose this Saturday to the Rams. I'm talking full Herb Brooks mode again. Get the whistle out. Sean Payton can turn the lights off. Sean Payton has been livid after these 2 preseason losses that came down to the final 2 minutes. And I think he might put some gassers out there if these guys come up short against the Rams. The Rams are not going to be playing anyone of note, for as far as I know. Aaron Donald is not even coming out to Colorado for joint practices, as him and his wife are going to celebrate the birth of their newborn child. So if the Broncos lose this game, I'm only being half joking here. Don't be shocked if you're going to the game and you're making your way for the aisle and you see Sean Payton grab a whistle and all 90 players are on the end zone running sprints up and down on your way out. He has been ticked off after the 0-2 start in the preseason. He wants to establish a new culture, a winning culture, and he wants that established now in the preseason because I don't blame him. He doesn't believe you can just turn on a flip and turn on a switch in the regular season and go, now start winning. He wants to start winning now, and that means sprints if these guys lose to the Rams.